I had a dream several nights ago. It was a dream of a memory that I thought I had long forgotten. When I was a kid, there was a farmer's market called Yoder's Market. It was about a 40-minute drive north of where my family and I lived. In the dream and in the memory, my mom took me with her to Yoder's Market to buy some fruits and vegetables. There on the checkout counter was a giant stack of Pokemon cards. This was the late 90s, and Pokemon cards were a pretty big deal. I kept staring at those cards, hoping my mom would notice my intense desire to have them, but it was to no avail. Today, Yoder's Market is no longer a farmer's market. For the most part, it looks abandoned. As the dream ended and I sat up in bed, a wave of nostalgia came rushing over me. I felt a forlorn sense of longing for those Pokemon cards. Why this memory? I thought to myself. It seems like such an uninteresting event. Why would I ever have nostalgia for an event that feels somewhat insignificant? What is nostalgia to begin with? Of course, we all know what nostalgia is. I'm sure all of you have experienced it at some point. Defined, nostalgia is a sentimental longing or wistful affection for the past. The word comes from the Greek words nostos, return, and algos, or pain. It was first used in 1678 by Johann Hofer, a Swiss physician and medical student, to describe the emotional state of homesick Swiss mercenaries fighting away from home. The word literally means the suffering caused by the desire to return to one's place of origin. And it was intended as a medical diagnosis for the way people feel when they are not in their native land. Yet the experience of nostalgia has existed for centuries before Johann Hofer put a word to it. Sophocles once remarked, "We long to have again the vanished past, in spite of all its pain." Dante remarked that there is no greater sorrow than to recall a happy time when miserable. In his book, Nostalgia, a Psychological Resource, Clay Routledge shares a vast array of observations and ideas about the nature and significance of nostalgia. He argues that nostalgia serves as a coping mechanism for dealing with stress, anxiety, and uncertainty. He also discusses the neurological mechanisms underlying nostalgia, including the role of dopamine and the brain's reward system. A paper published in SciSpace in 2022 highlights nostalgia's social impact, enhancing connectedness and intrapersonal benefits like optimism and empathy. A 2018 paper analyzed the role of nostalgia in literature, particularly in overcoming trauma and reconnecting with a lost self. Yet, just attempting to understand nostalgia feels like diving into the depths of an ocean. It's such a beautifully complex and diverse topic. Although academically important, neurological, sociological, and psychological analyses of the experience don't seem to do it justice. Perhaps that's because the experience of nostalgia is incredibly personal. How so? It can be summed up in one word: bittersweet. It's an experience that is, well, both bitter and sweet. I Remember, a poem written by the 19th century English poet Thomas Hood. It beautifully encapsulates the sweetness of nostalgic memories, serving as a reflection on his childhood. The poem is filled with sweet memories and a sense of longing for his past. I remember, where I used to swing. And though the air must rush as fresh to swallows on the wing, my spirit flew in feathers then, that is so heavy now, and summer pools could hardly cool the fever on my brow. Like Hood, I too have fond memories from my childhood. I still remember the smell of the linoleum flooring in our basement, where my brother and I would spend hours playing Command and Conquer on our dad's computer as kids. In fact, there's data to show that the time of life that people experience the most nostalgia for as they age is around 10 to 30 years old. This is referred to as the reminiscence bump. And there are many possible explanations for why this is the case. Perhaps it's simply because those are the most formative years of our lives. When we're young, the sphere of our world, or experience and understanding of it, is rather small. When I was 5, the sphere of my world was no larger than the scope of the house in which I lived. When I was 12, however, the scope of my world grew to include my street, neighborhood, friends' houses, and, well, anywhere I could ride my bike to. As we age, the sphere of our world grows larger. One of the reasons we have such fond memories of our lives between the ages of 10 to 30 is that the process of growing our sphere of the world is exciting. It's filled with adventure and exploration, discovery, and getting to know who you are and who others are around you. Quick note here. I would love to get your thoughts on this as well, by the way. I was thinking more about this idea of the reminiscence bump and the scope of our world as we age, and something hit me. In our culture today, we've seen an alarming rise in anxiety and depression among the younger generations, i.e. Gen Z and millennials. As I thought more about this, I wondered if things like social media have disrupted the natural development of our scope of the world. Let's say it is indeed the case that the natural flow of our development is that our scope of the world grows at a steady and predictable rate as we age. By the time we've reached 30 years old, our scope of the world is more or less solidified. With the advent of social media, however, the natural flow of development has been disrupted. Rather than having unlimited scope of the world at the age of 12, social media prematurely widens that gap to an even greater degree through constant exposure to everything going on in the world. Perhaps this is one of the many factors contributing to such a higher degree of anxiety and depression in younger generations. It's just an idea, but one that definitely hits deep if true. Again, would love your thoughts on this. All right, let's get back to it. This experience serves as the bedrock of our identity as an individual. It's incredibly personal. The person my friends and family remember or know me as is probably slightly different from the person I know myself as through the memories I keep. The sweetness of nostalgia is not only about happy memories of good times, but it's about seeing yourself through the eyes of your past. It's about seeing how you've become who you are today. These memories are liminal spaces. Although not liminal spaces that we physically live in, rather they're spaces that we remember, forever suspended in the immaterial substance of memories, only to ever be remembered by us. Nostalgic experiences aren't just about the sweetness of the memories we have. They're also about the bitterness of their long ago ending, never to return. Hood felt this longing at the end of each stanza. In fact, this is how he ends his poem. But now 'tis little joy to know I'm farther off from heaven than when I was a boy. The poem Ozymandias by 19th century English poet Percy Shelley is perhaps one of the most beautifully melancholy reflections on the bitterness of experiencing past memories which have all but faded into obscurity. It begins like this. I met a traveler from an antique land who said 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand half sunken a shattered visage lies, whose frowned and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. Shelley's poem ties together the bitterness of long past nostalgic memories to another important concept that is interwoven into the emotional fabric of nostalgia, namely existentialism. The melancholy we feel as we peruse down memory lane is not only a result of those memories being in the past rather than in the present, but it's also indirectly a result of the realization that those parts of our story came to an end. Just like any story, there is a beginning and an end to our story. As we age, the memories we share and the memories we live in aren't just about the good times. They're about our time, the time we've been given and what we've chosen to do with it. If you've ever binge watched a really good show, you might know exactly how this feels. Recently, my wife and I undertook the task of watching 2 shows in their entirety in one fell swoop. Overall, it took us 7 months to finish the story. Rather than having endless glee as we finished the last episode, I felt a wave of melancholy and sadness sweeping over me. We had accomplished watching nearly 1,000 episodes, and yet I already wished I could go back to the middle of it and start fresh, as though I had never seen it before. Yet, there will never again be a time where I haven't seen that story for the first time. Nostalgia is about our story. It's about the episodes of our lives that we will no longer see for the first time again. And yet, we are reminded that there is a beauty behind the word bittersweet. Although those memories may have come and gone, they're still an incredible part of who we are today. Nostalgia is a blessing in every way and in every moment. In my 20s, I moved around a lot, whether it be to a new state, a new school, or just a new apartment. Every time that I would leave a place I had lived in, I would take a few moments before walking out the door to step into each room. There I would dwell in the nostalgia of every memory I shared with that room. All the moments with friends, with family, and even all the moments I shared alone. I knew that once I left, I would most likely never be in that room ever again. Once I left, those memories would only ever exist in my past. By wandering from room to room, I not only had the chance to think fondly on the time I spent there, but I was also able to remember how those rooms changed me. Over time, I've been able to remember how every place I've lived has changed me. Nostalgia looks different and feels different for everyone. It's an endlessly diverse subject to ponder and think on because of the endlessly diverse ways it can be experienced. And yet there is one thing that these experiences can teach all of us, despite how diverse those experiences may be. Each and every one of us has a story. A special, unique, deeply personal, and incredibly beautiful story. And yet, we are all a part of an even bigger story. A story that will one day end just as much as our own. In his 1688 dissertation, where he coined the word nostalgia, Johann Hofer notes that the Swiss mercenaries, when serving in foreign lands, often fell victim to this illness, their thoughts constantly returning to the mountains and valleys of their homeland. What kind of homeland will you build with the memories that you make? What kind of story will you write?